Today, we're going to do a brief overview about the moon's nodes and what they mean in human design and how they can interact with your life and why they're really important, especially after you've had your Saturn return. So, with that said, let's get into it. The one thing to know about the nodes of the moon is that they're measurements. They're measurements of the ecliptic, so they're not actual physical bodies, but they are connected to the moon. In astrology, the nodes are considered karmic in some way. And this is a very, very basic explanation of how they are in astrology. There's way more in-depth information about the nodes. So if you want to check that out, please feel free to do so. But basically, what it's talking about is the North Node is where we're sort of moving into the future and in this life process. Now, the South Node would be considered something that is past life or kind of gifts and talents that we brought to this incarnation. With the nodes of human design, there are two sets. You have a personality side and you also have a design side. They're both considered part of your cross of life. So when we're just talking about the nodes, we're talking about the trajectory of your life, the environment that is best suited for you. There are 32 different polarities that you can have the nodes in, and you can have them reverse. So for instance, if you have the 3242 nodes, you can have the south node in the gate 32, and you can have the north node in the gate 42, or alternatively, you can have the gate 42 in the south node and the gate 32 in the north node. So they have different themes in that where you're moving into the future, what you begin with. So you have your childhood experience, your life, or that environment you grew up in, and how it progresses and changes as you grow older. So if we look at just the design nodes, they're connected to an actual physical environment. This physical environment becomes more important after your Saturn return. And sometimes people would just say between 28 to 29, but we could round it out to 30 to make sure that everybody, has had their Saturn return at that point. At that point, this is when your environment that is best suited connecting to your nodes is something that becomes potentially a more impactful thing in your life, or something that you need to be kind of connected with more. If you are somebody who hasn't had your Saturn return, it's always nice to sort of explore what your nodes are, what your environment is, and how does it feel for you? So you have that ability to experiment with the process and say, how does this feel when I'm here? How does it feel when I'm here? And to kind of compare the two, you could say, or compare all your experiences and see what is correct for you. Now, I'm not going to go into each individual environment, but that is a plan in the future that I will start to explore some of these topics in a more expansive way and kind of unpack the information so we can sort of talk about all these environments and how we can use them in our lives. But for today, it's a very brief overview about what the nodes mean and how you can kind of connect with them. We move over to the personality. This is where the nodes are giving you the perspective. And so they work together. So if you have the design nodes that are showing you your environment that you're meant to be. So for instance, say you are a caves environment. This is somebody who is considered a hardscape. It is considered somebody who likes to have their own space. It's a comfortable space where you only have one entrance in and out. And you want to feel sort of cozy in the way that you're protected and that anybody who's coming in and out. And there are many ways to have caves as your environment. But it's generally this feeling of wanting to be secure and feel safe. The one thing that is interesting about the caves environment is that although it is something about you want to feel safe and cozy, it is a hardscape, which means that being in an environment that is more urban might be more preferable as opposed to being out in the country away from things, and that's more of a landscape. So those are just little tiny things that we can look at. And so if you are in a caves environment, and then we go over to the personality nodes, and the personality nodes it is possibility. Okay, so that's how you see the world. Your perspective is to see the world through possibility. Now, if you are in an environment that is not correct for you, so you have a caves as an environment that can be really good for you, and you are not in a caves environment and you don't feel secure and you don't feel as though, you're safe, it's hard to look at the world in the, the possibility of, what you can see in a way that is positive. When you think about it, you're going to see what's the possibility somebody could, come in and hurt me, or what's the possibility that I'm in danger, those types of things. So the possibilities become different, and then that completely can shift your whole experience of how your life is. And so maybe you are meant to see the possibility in life in a way where you can move forward in it, but you can't because you're overcome by this feeling of anxiety because that particular part of your body, your actual body, your design is not being cared for. So that is kind of a quick example of potentially how these energies can work. So when we say that you are in an environment to live out your life purpose, the whole point is that you are feeling comfortable in your environment, you're aligning with your environment, and it opens you up to the world around you so that you can see what you are meant to see for you. And everybody has their own way of seeing. Again, you're going to have one of six ways of seeing based on your design. These are important additions to all the other things in human design. Like ultimately, the most important things are always to get the basics, to know what your strategy and authority is, to know what your design is, and look at your gates and look at your incarnation cross and those types of things. Because, when you know that and you have that basis, then you can sort of expand and see the other perspectives, because there is so much connection with all the different parts of a body graph. The lines, for instance, if you look at just a gate and you see it in a line, well, that line beneath it has a color, and beneath it has a tone, and beneath it has a base. So there is so many things. And everything above the line is something that we know about, but below the line, these might be internal ways that we act or the way we react to life based on those colors and those tones. So, these are types of things that are valuable as an accessory, but knowing the basics is always going to be, the place to start. If you're looking at your environment and your particular nodes, how are they interacting with the nodal cycles? Are they clicking in? Is it a nodal cycle where your nodes are returning to where they were when you were born? Or is it a nodal cycle where they're in reverse to when you were born? These could be impactful times. And one more interesting connection with the nodes is that they are very connected to the global cycles. So if we look at the global cycles, and we're going to have a global cycle shift in 2027, that is connected to the precision of the equinoxes. And it is really this idea of a reverse or a retrograde motion. So in other words, we're moving in 2027 from a first line, which is where we're at right now, global cycle, to a sixth line global cycle. So it's retrograding. Moon's nodes also move in retrograde motion. So they are connecting us to a bigger global cycle. It's another perspective, which is quite interesting. The other place the nodes can be impactful in your life is when you have your Uranus opposition, because based on human design theory, this is where we move from the south node into the north node theme. And that is sort of how we are designed based on human design, is that in the first half of your life or the first part of your life, and we're talking about a Uranian life, that is what the nine-centered body graph is connected to. And what we're connected to is a Uranian life, whereas when we theoretically were seven-centered before the discovery of Uranus, that was when we had more of a Saturnian life. So now we have a longer lifespan, and our Uranian bodies are supposed to be more resilient and kind of last longer. And so the midway of life is much different than the Saturn return, which in the old days would have been considered your sort of midlife. But nowadays, the midlife is further along. So when you come to your Uranus opposition, this is where you're moving from your south node theme up to your north node theme. No themes ever really go away, because if we're looking at the perspective that nodes are really the environment or the storyline or the road you're walking in your life, it is not exactly the same as a particular gate in your body graph. So it is kind of like the stage that you're walking on, or the environment is that is best suited for you to live out your life purpose, to live out your incarnation cross, as I mentioned. So ultimately, this is where when we move from the south node to the north node, we're kind of, the north node becomes the new environment. You can sometimes people who have their Uranus opposition have really big life shifts and really impactful life changes when that happens, or they feel like they want to change. And so that is something that we can look at. The other perspective is when you move from your south node to your north node. So, for instance, if we have the south node being the gate 28 and the north node is the gate 27, so we're moving from an environment of trying to find out the meaning of life to an environment of being nurtured and cared for and finding out what family means and what responsibility in a family means and what self-care and care for others mean, those types of themes. That means that we move the gate 28 from it being an environment of trying to find the life purpose. And maybe you're in an area where people are spiritually trying to find their life purpose. Those types of things. You have a lot of friends, or that's kind of what you grew up in. That's the kind of environment that you've sort of found your way in. And then as you move forward, you're moving into an environment of maybe having a family, or, the gate 27 can also be just about caring for something, anything. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't always have to be like a family or nurturing a family or something like that. It could be nurturing a book that you're writing. It could be nurturing animals, or it could be it is some level of nurturing. It could be about self-nurturing. Maybe you didn't do much of that when you were younger. So now we're having the gate 28 still remaining as an energy in your chart, but it is now not your environment per se. It instead is part of your body graph and kind of becomes like any other gate in your body graph. But now your new environment is going to be the gate 27. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, the theory is that for people who have a sixth line profile with the Chiron return, that this Uranus opposition isn't as important. But I feel like everybody has a nodal shift, and I don't fully agree with the fact that it's not important. I think it's important, and I think it's always something that is interesting and something that is worth exploring. If you're interested in seeing a little bit more about how nodes can shift during your Uranus opposition, I did do a chart a very long time ago. I did do a chart on Kevin Hart, and when he had his big accident, and it was sort of right around his nodal shift or his Uranus opposition. So if you're interested in seeing a little bit more of how I talked about that, you can check that video out, and I'll leave the link below. Hope this has been helpful, and I will be back again soon. Until then, take care and bye for now.